Thanks very much, AJ, and welcome to the Zeem webinar studio. Today, we're going to talk about how to get your members strongly engaged with your association, and I'll give you some ideas about how you can increase the effectiveness of your volunteer committees. We chose this topic because member engagement is critical to member retention, and member retention is core to the sustainability of membership organizations. I'm going to share with you what you need to engage, motivate, retain, and recruit both members and volunteers. For those of you who are regular attendees at our webinars, you know we host these webinars to give you timely, valuable information that you can take back to your organization and use right away. These webinars also give us an opportunity to help you see some of the work that we do. So when you're looking for help, you'll think of us. Let's get started. Member engagement. The reason member engagement is so important, as I mentioned earlier, is that sustainability is really predicated on member engagement. And what's kind of interesting, often when we're talking about member engagement, we really don't talk about volunteers, but volunteer recruitment, volunteer interest, volunteer engagement, and satisfaction are really critical to member engagement, because when you think about it, a volunteer is really the most engaged sort of member you actually have. So you need to be thinking about your volunteer process when you're thinking about member engagement. And from that, your volunteers are one of your best sources of member attraction. So what does success look like? When we've got a highly engaged membership, what have we got? Typically what we've got is we've got high turnout for our events. We've got lots of participation in our member programs. We've got a strong pipeline of volunteers ready to come into the system. And those volunteers are motivated, they're engaged, they're informed, and they're effective. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. I'm going to start by talking about engaging members, and then I'm going to move into volunteers, engaging them, motivating them, recruiting them, and then we're going to talk about recruiting members as we finish off. I'm going to give you some next steps. I'm going to make sure that we've got an opportunity for live Q&A at the end of the webinar, and you'll have an opportunity to decide which of these things you really want to focus on. So I want to give you a challenge and a suggestion here. I'm going to give you 10 ideas today, and I encourage you to choose one. You can choose more than one if you want, but make a commitment to just choose one. As we go through this, make some notes. What's something that you figure you can get the most bang for your buck from with the least effort? Choose something. Start on it immediately. And if you have to eliminate or park something that's already on your, what I know is an overly long to-do list, just put something on hold for a little bit of time until you get one of these things done. You'd be amazed about how much follow-on effect you're going to get by doing even one of these things. So just do something. I want to start by introducing you to an old Psychology 101 concept. And this is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I found that this hierarchy is very relevant to associations, because often most of the stuff that we're talking about when we talk about associations really relates to how people feel about themselves, how they interact with others, how they feel about their relationship with others. And a lot of that is in Maslow's hierarchy of needs. In this hierarchy of needs, the bottom level is the physiological, and associations can't do anything about whether we've got enough to eat, that kind of thing. But once we get above there, from safety and above, you know, the safety of our profession, the safety of our jobs, belonging, that sense of belonging to something that's bigger than ourselves, the sense of esteem that you get from accomplishing something in your profession, in your industry, whether volunteering or not, the esteem of your colleagues, that's of value to us as human beings. And then self-actualization, when we kind of step out of our zone and accomplish something that maybe we didn't think we could accomplish. We are in a position as associations to be able to deliver much of what's on this hierarchy, and that influences the way we actually go about delivering it. So I'm going to tie back some of these things in a moment. What I'd like to do right now is I want to share with you some survey results we got from working with an association recently. I'm not going to name the association. The reason I'm sharing these with you is there's a lot of thoughts in here that are universal, and there's a lot of thoughts in here that actually surprised me, and I'm going to share those with you. We are talking to a group of volunteer leaders, and they are volunteer leaders around the country who are responsible for regional groups amongst that association. So we asked them a few questions, and one of the first questions was, what made you decide to participate as a leader? Now, this is a really relevant question, because really what we're asking here is, what made you decide to volunteer? What was it that triggered you to say, yeah, I'll put my hand up, I'll volunteer? Well, here's the answers we've got. And these were in order of the number of people who gave that answer. So the last two here are ones we hear very commonly. I wanted to give back. We hear that all the time from volunteers. I wanted to network. I wanted to make more connections. Absolutely, mother's milk. What I thought was really interesting about one of the answers we got here was friends. I had friends that have been encouraging me to participate as a leader. Now think about the value of that. You know, this wasn't a mass call out from the association. This was somebody who picked up the phone to somebody they know or spoke to them at an event and said, you know what, I'm having a really fulfilling experience being a volunteer here. You should too. Now, how much more powerful that is to hear from a friend than it is to hear from the association. And if you're doing both, you've really got a great combination of assets that are working for you. One of the other questions we asked was, what is your greatest challenge as a volunteer leader? None of these are surprising, but one of them, motivating colleagues, that's a big deal. You know, when you've decided to become a volunteer leader, you, like everybody else, don't have a lot of time. You're struggling for ideas for programming. But if you've only got a couple of people on that group that are actually doing all the work and trying to motivate the other people, that can be very difficult. So I want to share some information with you in the next few minutes about how you as the association can help those volunteers to motivate their colleagues. Now, this question was, this is all about the what's in it for me question. What did you feel was the personal or professional value from volunteering? And here's how they answered. Now, what I thought was kind of interesting about this was the elements that are highlighted here. This is all part of this Maslow's hierarchy of needs. This encompasses so much of the top part of the pyramid. Belonging, having a sense of being part of something bigger, having a support system, friendship, inclusion. All of these things are part of that hierarchy, and they're all very human things. You know, if you're delivering that to a group of people, that alone is probably going to be enough to keep them coming back over and over to the organization and continuing to volunteer. So let's be very aware of fostering that sense of belonging, that opportunity to make sure that people get that sense of esteem, that other people value them. You know, I often hear people who win an award with an association saying, I was so shocked to receive an award, when everyone around them is saying, wow, that person's awesome, here's all the great things they do. But we don't often tell each other that. And so it can be a surprise for people who are leaders to find out how much in esteem they are held by everybody else. And if we can share that, that really helps us feel better as human beings and gives us a much stronger sense of belonging and wanting to continue to volunteer, because we realize that what we're offering is valued by our peers. And then, of course, at the top part of the pyramid, that's self-actualization. You know, if you have somebody on a governance committee, that's probably not something they're doing in their everyday life. So they're not only learning new skills, they're stepping out of their comfort zone, and they're learning how to do something that maybe they didn't think they would ever know how to do. So you're really hitting a lot of these levels of the hierarchy just from a human needs perspective by engaging and making your volunteers happy. So let's talk about engaging members. Here's our first tip. Now, usually when we're looking at engaging members, one of the first things that we look at is, are they attending events? So what do we need to do to make sure we're getting decent attendance at events? If you are in an industry or a profession where people actually need specific information, in other words, things are changing on an ongoing basis, they need new information on a timely basis in order to do a good job of their job, giving them that timely knowledge that they need very quickly is a really good reason for people to come out to events, whether they're virtual or in person. So anytime you've got new information, try to get it out there as quickly as possible. Maybe you don't have time to set up a live event, maybe it's going to be a webinar, but make sure it's timely and they know that when you're bringing it up, you're spot on in terms of this is new, this is compelling, this is something that you need to know. I also want to share with you the idea of ease of networking. Often we will let's say we put together an event that starts with a cocktail party, and you think, okay, fine, I'm the event manager, I got that nailed, networking is done. But it kind of isn't. You think about the people that are going to be walking into that room. Now, if I am one of those ultra gregarious people, and I walk into a room full of little groups of people standing around with cocktails, I'm going to go, awesome, here's all these people I can go and talk to. I don't know any of them. Isn't that wonderful? I'll go around the room, work in the room. But you know what? Most of us don't have that level of gregariousness, let alone even confidence. And typically what we're going to do is we're going to look around the room and go, is there anyone here I know? If there isn't, then I'm going to feel a little bit uncomfortable, and maybe I'm going to start looking around for other people where there's only a single person there. But the whole point is, I am probably not going to leave that cocktail party having met a lot of new people. But now let's think about it in a completely different way. Let's say I walk into the door, the board of directors and the other volunteers are scattered throughout the room, and they're looking for single people walking in the door. Somebody from the board immediately comes up to me, introduces themselves as being a member of the board of directors, has a little chat with me, and then takes me off and introduces me to a group of people. Maybe they're other members of the board of directors, maybe they are senior influencers within the organization. All of a sudden, I very easily met new people. And not only that, but what's really interesting about having the board of directors involved is I feel a little bit special because the board of directors actually came up to me. You know, the chair actually cared that I was in the room. The chair introduced me to other people on the board of directors. Just that simple act of making the board of directors accountable for being welcoming and making people have the opportunity to network and connect can be a really powerful thing. So think about something like that. Now, if it's not a cocktail party or a room of people standing up and it's a group of tables, maybe you can organize things so that people actually move tables partway through the event, so that I don't just get to know the 5 other people that are at my table, I get to know 10 people because I've been at 2 different tables. It takes a little bit of extra organization and a few minutes of downtime while you move people around, but it's easily done, and it's just so much easier for the people at that event to connect with each other. I also want to throw the idea of fun in there. I learned something really interesting at an event we were hosting a few weeks back. And I was talking to a group of people that had never been at that conference before and just decided they were going to go this time. And they were expecting what they described to me as a very quote unquote corporate event. And what they thought that meant was they're going to come into a room of a lot of serious people, all wearing suits with their, you know, intellectual hats on. And in fact, that was definitely part of what the conference had. But what really made them feel engaged and like they were going to be with a fun group of people when at registration, they had an opportunity to pick from, and you've seen these little ribbons you can attach to the bottom of your badge that says, you know, world's best ballerina, or likely to break into show tunes, that kind of stuff. And they said they saw those ribbons and they said, oh, this isn't just a corporate event, this is full of fun people. So just a little simple thing like that costs no money, takes no resources, takes no time, can really help with networking. It gives you a question to ask other than, you know, where do you work and what's your job title? Oh, break into show tunes. Do you sing? Oh, I play piano. It gives a whole other reason for extending the conversation that you're having with that person you're networking with them. So just think about those extra little things and how just a few extra little things can really help. Keep in mind too about making change. You know, we're all focused on getting the maximum number of people out to the event. And so we're always, you know, fine tuning and tweaking to figure out what can we do to get more people out to this particular event. You know, maybe if we held it at lunch, we'd get more people than if we did it at breakfast. Maybe if we held it in this location, we would get more people out. We're always thinking about more people, and that's a very good thing. But let's keep in mind, it's not just about more people, it's about how many people. So you might get fewer people out to a breakfast event, but they might be different people than you're going to get out to a lunch event. So let's say, for example, that we have 5 events throughout the year and we typically get 500 people. So what are we thinking? We're thinking, I got 500, I want more than 500. Well, think about it in both ways. Is this 500 different people? Or is this the same 100 people that come out to all 5 events? If that's the case, you're getting 500 people, but you're only engaging 100 of your members. Maybe we'd actually be better off only getting 400 people out, but it's 400 different people, which means, doing the math, we are actually engaging 200 more members than we were when we got 500 people out to our events. So think about how you're giving people different opportunities at different times of the day, perhaps different venues, to attract and engage a wider range of your members. Now, that'll not only mix things up a bit, but you've got to think about human nature. We are creatures of habit, yes, but we crave variety. I'd like you to put your thinking hat on for a moment. Just shut your eyes and think about your favorite meal. Maybe this is something you don't get all the time. It's something that it's a little bit more expensive. Maybe it's a little bit more time consuming to prepare, but let's think about it. What's your favorite meal? Now let's say I'm going to have that meal tonight. That sounds great. I'm going to have my favorite meal tonight. I'm looking forward to that. Now let's say you're not only going to have it tonight, you're going to have it tomorrow morning, tomorrow for lunch, tomorrow for dinner. And in fact, you're going to have your favorite meal 3 times a day for the next 5 days in a row. How do you feel about that favorite meal by the end of the week? It's the same thing with events. No matter how good it is, no matter how perfect it is, if it's the same every time, we're going to feel, you know what, I can give it a miss this time. It's going to be the same as it was before. It's going to be the same as it was next time. If I miss it this time, I haven't missed anything. I've got no fear of missing out because it's the same every time. So we need to take some chances in mixing things up. You know, maybe it's a different venue. Maybe it's the same venue, but it's a different meal. It's a breakfast event instead of lunch. Maybe it's a different price point. Maybe it's shorter. Maybe it's longer. Think about mixing things up because people want variety, and we will respond to variety by coming out to more than we would without that. Also, think about marketing. Marketing is so important, and often we think all we need to do is deliver a good event, and marketing is simply sending out the facts. November 15th, this is what's happening. Here's the registration link. Come on and be there. Well, have we made an effect to make it compelling? You know, let's think about how long the message is and how compelling is the subject line and the first line. I'm sure you've heard this many times before. Oh, that's what you meant. Oh, I only read the first line of the message. A lot of people only read the first line. Some people only read the subject line and don't go any further unless the subject line is compelling. So think about what you've got in those first few words. Have you explained what's in it for them and what the action is that you want them to take? Further down, you can have things like photos and testimonials if you're trying to get them out to an event that occurs on an ongoing basis. But think about what you can do to make it convincing and compelling to get there. And also, please make it easy to register. You know, I see registration all the time where it's open to members and non-members, but if I'm a non-member, you know, I have to go through all my files, or a member going through all my files trying to prove I am a member and what's the right registration number to use and all of that kind of stuff. You're putting impediments in the way of me registering. Just make it easy. I want to click on a link. I want to fill out some very basic information about myself, and I'm hoping that it's pre-populated if I'm already a member. Pay my money and leave, and I'm done. Make it as easy as possible. Don't put in any impediments to stop me from making that buying decision. Also, don't just think about using bulk email. Think about using the circle of influence of your volunteers. All of your volunteers have people that they know. Encourage them to reach out when there is an event via email, telephone, whatever the case may be. Hi, it's Erin. Hey, I'm going to be at the event on such and such a date. I hope you're going to be there. Do you want to join me? Use that circle of influence. And keep in mind, when you have suppliers in your organization, these are the people who know everybody. And by suppliers, I mean people that are selling goods and services to your core members. These people, by the nature of what they do, they are in sales, they are in marketing, they know everybody. So if you want to look at the people that have the biggest list of the circle of influence, it's going to be your suppliers. And not only that, but suppliers usually want a reason to reach out to people. So give them an opportunity to use what they do best, which is their circle of influence, to get more people out to the event. Now, in terms of marketing your program, it's a similar kind of thing to think about. You also need to want to vary your messaging, because keep in mind, your member programs are things that go on an ongoing basis. So it shouldn't just be the same message every time to inform people of this program. Change things up a bit, maybe a slightly different subject line, a slightly different first line. Allow people to trigger something in their brain that lets them think this is something different they're seeing in this email. This isn't the same old email that they've been looking at, you know, every quarter for the last 3 years that they've been a member. Think about having testimonials. If it's for a member program, remember, even if it's free to me, it takes time. So you've got to convince me that it's worth the time and or the money that I've got to invest in order for this to be useful to me. Even a free event involves me getting there, getting back, and taking the time away from my job or my family to be there. So maybe give me a testimonial as to why this resource is really helpful. Use whatever influence you can to make it feel really compelling that I want to be part of this. Now, I also want to talk to you about this once a year activity that you have for renewing your members, and this one-time only opportunity that you have to bring new members on board. You want to have a process around that. When you bring a new member on board, you've probably got no more than 12 months to engage them. If they're not engaged in the organization in the first 12 months, they are probably not going to renew. So you need to make sure that they are made to feel welcome right away, and they are given the opportunity to take advantage and be aware of all of the resources and opportunities that are out there. So make sure you've got a way of engaging them right after they've made the buying decision. Now, if you've got a relatively small membership, in other words, you've got new members trickling in, you don't have new members where you've all of a sudden got 200 new members all at once, you know, it's ones, it's tens, that kind of thing, you have the ability to be able to pick up the phone and welcome them. And that's not just staff and volunteers. When you've got new members, just reach out to the group that you've got in your membership committee. Do you know any of these people? Or do they know of you? Pick up the phone and welcome them into the organization. Now, let's talk about phone calls. You do not have to get through to people. That's going to take maybe 8, 9, 10 tries. Just leave a voice message. If you can't get through, just having them listen to your voice message and hear a welcome. When was the last time you picked up a voice message? It was just somebody saying, you know what, you don't need to call me back. I just wanted to say we're really happy to have you on board. Here's some of the things you might want to think about taking advantage of now that you're a new member. And by the way, my name is so-and-so. If you've got any questions, just reach out to me at any time. Imagine that, a voicemail that isn't a marketing call and that I don't have to take any action on. So there's no need to get through to them, but a phone call can really, really help. If you've got a very large membership or one or the other, this works for both, think about having a really short video. And that short video explains what the value of membership is, and here's some things that you want to get involved in right away. Here's how you get your login to get to the member resources area, which is, by the way, something that I would try to avoid because that's an impediment, but just basics, 1 or 2 minutes that welcomes you to the organization, tells you what you need to know. When it comes to onboarding members and new members as well, please think about having an event calendar that you can share with people. When I'm renewing, I'm trying to make that renewal decision, or I'm trying to make the decision to join the organization, it really helps if I can look at something that says, hey, here's what I'm going to be doing over the course of the next year. Here's all the things I'm going to be able to take advantage of. Now, I often hear people from associations going, there's no way I can do that. I don't know when my events are going to be over the course of the next 12 months. You know, we typically get them organized, you know, a few weeks, a few months ahead of time. That's the way it works. I really only know what the next event is. You know, it's not that complicated. You don't need to know what the date of the event is. You don't need to know who the speakers are. All you need to know is, hey, this is what we're going to be doing in the spring of next year. Here's what's going to be happening in the fall of next year. Here's the general subject that it's going to be. Here it's going to be an in-person event, or it's going to be a webinar event. You can give them a really good idea of what you're going to deliver without even having the specifics. And then you start wrapping the specifics into the event calendar as you get them booked. So don't let the fact that you don't know the details stop you from having an event calendar. Believe me, you can do it now. And if we're now in December and you are on a calendar year, fiscal year, and you don't know any of the events that you're doing for the next year, start your event planning a little bit earlier. There's no reason why you can't be sitting down in October or November and getting a rough idea of what your event calendar is going to look like for the rest of the year. That way your membership people have it and they're ready to go in their renewal program when they started in October or November. They've got that event calendar. You've got a good sense of what you're doing, and you can map it on your own calendar and on your volunteers' calendar. It makes you better organized, and it takes absolutely no more work. Also consider when people are renewing or coming on board, can you give them a deal on an event that you already have registration set up for? I can get X number of dollars off that event if I buy it at the same time that I buy membership. The advantage of this is it automatically gives me a quantifiable benefit because I'm getting a discount, and it guarantees that I'm actually going to show up at one thing over the course of my first year or my next year of membership. So think about bundling a discount package if I pay for it at the time of membership, because you want to make sure that I'm going to take advantage of it. Giving me a discount coupon for later doesn't ensure that I'm going to show up, but if I paid for it, I am going to show up. Now let's talk about your metrics. In order for you to know whether you're doing a good job of engaging your members, you need to have metrics. You need to be tracking things. Otherwise, how do you know? What are the metrics you need in order to track things? Event attendance. You want to be able to go into your association management system and run a report that says, here's members that have attended an event within the last 12 months, and here's members who haven't. If you've got members who have not attended an event in the last 12 months, that is a special segment that you should be reaching out to, because those are members who are at risk. Look at the members that have attended an event. Can you run reports that show what segment they're in? Are they in a particular sector where they're more likely to attend events? These are really relevant and important pieces of information for us. Can you check who is using the resources? Does your association management system allow you to do that? Keep in mind your association management system is a hugely valuable tool for you for recording metrics and tracking them. And sometimes you might be engaging in false economy by having a very inexpensive association management system, whereas a slightly more expensive one might give you these really important metrics. Imagine if you had these and you could actually target people who haven't been actively engaged and give them something that's meaningful to them, that's tweaked just for them, that's more likely to bring them into the fold. Think about what you're doing and how easily you can pull those reports. Now, once you can pull the reports and you've done it for the first time, now you've got a base case. Now start setting targets for what the engagement level is that you want to get people into your events. What percentage of people do you want to ensure that you've got into your events and into your member programs, and start figuring out how you're going to get there. So track your metrics, set your targets, and then monitor yourself against those targets. That's 6 tips. Now let's talk about engaging and motivating your volunteers, because remember, I was telling you earlier that your volunteers are by definition your most engaged members. So how can we make sure that our most engaged members are even more engaged? Make sure that when people volunteer, they are given information immediately, some form of training right away. People don't like to feel stupid. They don't like to feel like they are asking obvious questions that they think they should have known the answer to. It makes people feel unconfident. It makes people feel like they're not being cared for. Even if you feel they already know this stuff, make sure that you are actually sitting down with them as a group immediately at the very first meeting that they attend or before, or that you've got a video for them if you've got a lot and you just don't have the manpower to do that. What you want to be informing them of is, what is the mandate for the committee that they've joined? How do committees work in terms of your governance structure? Are committees there to make decisions and actually execute things, or are they there just to make recommendations? How do things work? How do they interact with the staff? Who does the committee report to? What's the accountability? How much time is it going to take me? And what are the kinds of things I'm going to be expected to do on this committee? Also, make sure that all your volunteers are fully trained in what your member value proposition is. That answers the question for a prospective member, what's in it for me? You want all your volunteers to be able to answer that question, because your volunteers, remember, are your super engaged members. They are going to be out there talking to people who aren't members, who are going to be asking them that question. Make sure they can answer it. Make sure they can answer it in a way that feels comfortable for them and is relevant for everybody who is a member. So make sure you're giving them information right away, giving them everything they need to feel confident and to help them get to become productive and effective right from the beginning. And connect them with the other volunteers. You know, one of the reasons why people volunteer, you know this, and we've seen this from the survey results, they want to make more friends. They want to make more connections. So help them to do that right away. Make it easy for them. Connect them with the other volunteers. Make sure that you do telephone introductions. Make sure you do virtual introductions around the table. Make sure that you reach out to people and say, you know, Emily, I think you really want to learn more about John because you guys have a lot in common. I would encourage you to, you know, maybe stay on the call after the rest of us drop off. Give them an opportunity to connect with people you think can help them and are going to be of value to them. And make sure your chair and your CEO are doing a good job of making them feel welcome as well. Make sure that new members get outreach from people on the board of directors and or the executive director, so they know they feel valued, they know they feel recognized, and they know that they have somebody in a senior decision-making a position of authority who they can call and ask a question without potentially feeling stupid in front of a group of people that they may feel already know the answer to the question. You'd be surprised how often, you know, highly professional and confident adults feel uncomfortable asking questions that they think are obvious. Make it easy for them. Now, when it comes to engaging and motivating volunteers, we need to feel like we're accomplishing something. Now, if you're on a standing committee like finance, for example, governance, often it's hard to look back in the last 12 months as a member of that committee and say, wow, here's what I accomplished. Well, as I'm on the governance committee, yeah, we had, you know, we did these nominations, we got some new directors on the board. We do that every year. Yeah, I'm on the finance committee. We reviewed the financial statements before each board meeting, but what gave me a sense of accomplishment? Make sure that every committee, regardless of whether it's a task force or it's a standing committee, make sure every committee has one meaningful objective that they are intending to achieve in the next year. Something simple that's going to be absolutely certain that they can do it. It's definitely achievable, and it's definitely meaningful. Maybe with the governance committee, it's coming up with one really much needed and valuable policy. By the end of this year, we are going to have come up with a nominations policy and a good process to work that everybody's going to be happy with and feel is very open and very transparent. Give them a goal to work towards. Maybe with finance, maybe it's, maybe it's the way our financials are presented at the AGM. Maybe it's the way our financials are presented in the board meetings. Maybe it's something different. Make sure everybody's got something that they can win on and look back and say, yeah, while I was on the finance committee, this is what we accomplished. And make sure that with those accomplishments, there is recognition. Make sure that your committees are recognized at the AGM, and those wins that they had, here's what this committee accomplished for you over the course of the last year. Here's the things they were accountable for, and here's the extra things that they did. I also encourage you to make sure when you're training your volunteers to show them a volunteer career path of sorts. Maybe you have committees that are kind of entry-level committees. They're very low commitment. There's not much that you actually have to do. You don't need a lot of experience to be on those committees. Show them how they get from there, something very simple to contribute to, onto the board of directors. They may not care about ever getting to the board of directors, but they can see a path ahead of them. And it makes them start thinking about, well, maybe I could be on the board of directors. I mean, this is what they're telling me, this is the entry point, and from here I really could be on the board of directors. A lot of people don't think they could ever be eligible for the board of directors. You want to start them thinking early in their volunteer career that this is how I could get there. So give them that opportunity, share that, and think about it. Think about how you are helping to train and progress your volunteers to get them to the board of director level. Now, while you're thinking about how to manage your committees, make sure that what you're giving them is an opportunity to have real influence and deliver real value. Make sure they're not just another pair of hands that gets random tasks from time to time. Make sure that they understand that this is an opportunity to really change the trajectory and make the trajectory and better the organization. Be there for them to provide as staff the right amount of support, but don't get too far involved, or you're going to end up in a situation where your committee just feels that they're there to come up with ideas and the staff's going to do the rest of it. And if that's what the committee is responsible for, good, that's great. But if you're actually expecting the committee to roll their sleeves up and start doing stuff, don't spoon feed them. Give them an opportunity to be self-determined, to run their own meetings, and not always have staff there to do everything for them and to walk them through every single step. Give them accountability, give them influence, and give them an opportunity to really genuinely deliver value. Now, let's talk about recruiting volunteers. When we recruit a volunteer, we have by definition increased the engagement level of that volunteer. So every volunteer we recruit, we've increased engagement. So this is an important consideration. Now, this just happens to be number 10 of the 10 tips that I promised you. And this is a really important thing. It's building your volunteer pipeline. How do we get a pipeline of people who are volunteers and want to be volunteers? A lot of it is hands-on recruitment. Keep in mind, as your directors and your other volunteers are out there, help them to understand that part of their job is bringing new volunteers on board. So anytime they're at an event, it's their job to be scanning around for people they know or have just met who might be good volunteers, people who say, oh, I didn't know the organization does that. Your volunteers should be able to say, well, not only do we do that, but we've actually got a committee. You might want to consider being on the committee. Find out more about it. I can send you some information. So make sure we've got personal circles of influence being used to recruit people in as volunteers. Pitch it as a leadership opportunity. A lot of us in our daily life actually have very limited opportunity to be leaders. It's just the nature of the work that we do. Explain to them, here are the skills that you're going to develop. Here are the leadership opportunities you have by being part of this committee. You can chair this committee. Here's the leadership opportunities you're going to have. Here's the training that we're going to give you. That's a perk of being part of a volunteer committee. Now, also, one thing to be very aware of in this environment where we've got these massive bulges going through the system, we've got this massive bulge of baby boomers, we've got this massive bulge of millennials, and in their wake, we leave vacuums. So be very aware of your demographics. There are a lot of organizations right now that are losing members quite rapidly, not because they're doing anything wrong, but just because they were full of baby boomers who are now retiring. And because they weren't working on their demographics over the course of the last 10 years, they've got an aging membership, and they don't have new people coming in behind them. So as you're looking at your volunteer committees, keep in mind, this is one of your most effective sources of bringing new members in. So think about having a quota for your committees in terms of the demographics. If all of your committees, if your membership is older and all of your committees are older, then you've really got a self-fulfilling prophecy happening. It is going to be a tendency for older people to volunteer just because they tend to have more confidence and they may have more time. So you may have to be more actively involved if you have a quota in getting younger people in, earlier stage in their career, or new members. All of those three have demographic components that you do want to get involved as volunteers. Now let's talk about recruiting members. This is something that we all have to do. It's a critical and important part of the sustainability of the organization. What are some things you need to know about recruiting members? First of all, why do people join associations? It's really typically only one of two reasons. Now there's a third reason here, which is I get, some form of insurance which saves me $300 a year, which is actually more than my membership. Yes, there are organizations that offer that, but if that's all you're offering, you're not very sustainable, because if you lose that little perk, you could lose the bulk of your membership. So these are the two things that you really want to focus on. Why do we join associations? One, because the mandate resonates with me. I look at the mandate and go, yeah, that's something our profession and our industry needs. And it gives me a stronger voice by being part of this. It resonates with me. The second thing is even more visceral, that this allows me to be with people whose company I enjoy, who get it, who share my values, they share my interests, they understand my frustrations, they share my joys. This second one alone is what really keeps people coming back and renewing with the organization. It's that I want to be part of this, I feel like I belong, and that's the visceral Maslow's hierarchy that really keeps members there and staying with the organization. So I told you I was going to give you 10 tips. I'm giving you a bonus tip, and this is the most important tip of all. First of all, know what your member value proposition is. We talked about this earlier. This answers the question, what's in it for me from the point of view of a member? Make sure you've taken the time to figure that out, to articulate it, and you've trained everyone in it. We've talked about active hands-on recruitment. Use the circles of influence for all of your volunteers. They don't have to pick up the phone and cold call people. Now, if they're suppliers, they might want to do that, but they just need to reach out to people that they know or know of, people that know them. It's going to be much more influential if you've got people who know or know of each other talking to each other. That's the easiest way to recruit members. If somebody you know picks up the phone and says, I just noticed you're not a member of our organization, why don't you join? I will probably say yes. If it's somebody I know and respect and they say it's a good idea, why wouldn't I do it? Now, if I get an email saying, Erin, you should join this association, I'll probably just delete it. I get those all the time. So think about using the humanity that you've got in your volunteers and their circle of influence to actually recruit members. So let's recap. I explained to you earlier that volunteers are by definition your most engaged members. So when you're talking about engaging members, think about volunteers, because that's really the core of engagement. So we talked about engaging and motivating your volunteers. You want to keep them happy. You want to keep them feeling like they've accomplished something, that they're getting shouted out, that they're getting valued. We talked about recruiting members and engaging members, and I gave you 11 tips. We talked about making events compelling. How can we make sure that people have reasons for coming out to the events? They're going to come out because they're having fun. They're going to come out because networking's easy. They're going to come out because they're getting valuable information in a timely manner. What are we doing to make our events new, something a little bit different, something that's going to attract a wider, broader swath of our membership? What are we doing about marketing our programs and events? Are we actually using our in-house communication skills to make it really compelling, to make people want to come out to our events and use our resources, or are we just stating the facts and hoping that that's going to do the job for us? Do we have a process around onboarding and renewing? Are we thinking about this one opportunity in a lifetime that we have to onboard people effectively? And are we thinking about this annual opportunity we have to get them involved in the renewal process and remind them again why they want to be members? Do we have a way of tracking our metrics? Do we have a good association management system that allows us to pull those reports? Do we have targets for our metrics? What are we doing with our volunteers to make sure that they're well trained, to give them an opportunity to quickly connect with the other volunteers and give them an opportunity to be on well-managed committees that make them feel like they're accomplishing things, that it's really easy, that it's very easy to understand, that everything is really well organized and they feel very strongly supported. Do you have a plan and a process for building and maintaining your volunteer pipeline? And finally, do you know your member value proposition? Do you know how to share it? Is everyone trained on your member value proposition? That's the 11 tips. Now, in terms of your next steps, you've got a number of things that you can focus on here. I encourage you to look at your events. How successful are they? What do you want to change? Are you engaging enough members? Are you engaging a broad range of members? Have you tried something new recently? What's going on with marketing? Could it be better? What about member renewals and onboarding? Could that be better? Similarly with your volunteer onboarding and training, could we be doing more for them to make them feel more happy and make them want to continue to be volunteers? Do you have a pipeline of volunteers? Do you have a plan for how to build that pipeline? Are your staff and your volunteers, do they understand that it's part of their role to help build that pipeline? And can you articulate your MVP? Can you articulate it? Can all of your volunteers articulate it? Does it resonate? Is it still relevant? Do you need to do some work on it? Just pick one thing. Get started on it right away. And if you have to park something else that's on your 5-page to-do list, so be it. Pick something easy that's going to give you a quick ROI. Try it and see what happens. Just pick one thing and get started on it right away. If you want some help, we can help you with member engagement. We can help you with articulating and communicating your member value proposition. What I'd like to do now, that concludes the presentation portion of the webinar. We're going to open it up to live Q&A, and let's start with some of the questions that you have sent to us in advance or typed into chat. AJ, what have we got?
Thanks, Erin. So we've had a couple of questions sent in. The first one is, how do you engage the younger members? If your members are corporate, how do you reach deeper into them beyond the C-suite?
You know, that is actually a webinar in itself, but I promise you I'm not going to take 30 minutes to answer it. That's an absolutely excellent question, and it actually cuts both ways. Sometimes you can only have so many contacts for a corporate membership. And in fact, you will find some companies really want to limit the number of contacts that are going out to amongst their organization for one reason or another. So there's a limited number of people that you can engage with at that entity. And usually you've got one problem or the other. Either you're engaging with the CEO or the owner of the organization and you're not penetrating any deeper than that. Or worse still, at the other end, somebody has decided that the best person for your contact is the accounts payable clerk because that's where the invoice is going to go. So it cuts both ways. Are you starting at the bottom with your contact and unable to penetrate up to the C-suite, or is it the other problem? The important consideration here is making sure that the decision maker understands the value of getting their employees engaged with the organization. Make sure that the owner understands that this role, these are all roles that can benefit from resources that are available within the organization. Make sure that the CEO, the owner, understands that by getting their people involved with the organization, their people are going to get better training, they're going to get better contacts, maybe they're going to get better sales. Make the case to the owner, the decision maker, the CEO, that this is the value of getting other people involved. Get them to give you names of people that should be involved with the organization, and then I encourage you to reach out to them. Don't just put them on the mailing list. If I have no idea what's going on behind the scenes and I'm the head of sales, and all of a sudden I receive an email from an association that I've never heard of, and I've got no idea why I'm on the mailing list, I'm probably just going to think it's spam and I'm going to immediately unsubscribe. What you want to do is reach out to me and say, hi, so-and-so, the boss, has said you would be a great person to get involved in the organization. Here's why. Here's the kind of, and really what you're doing here is you're selling the organization all over again to another influential person in that organization. So you're increasing the sustainability of that membership by getting other people engaged. So how do you reach deeper beyond the C-suite? Start with the C-suite, explain to them why it's of value to get other particular roles involved and what the ROI is going to be of that. Get those names, reach out to them, resell to them, get them on their list, but make sure they know why they're on the list and what's in it for them. AJ, do we have another question?
Yeah, actually, we've had a few flood in while you were speaking just then. The first one, it's sort of a how long's a piece of string question, but can you recommend 1 to 2 association management systems?
Okay, I will try. We have a few that we use in-house and that we have used in-house, and they all have different elements of value, I guess is the best way to put it. One system that we have used is Memby, and the advantage of Memby is it's very inexpensive. The challenge with Memby is the reporting is nowhere near as good as it could be. So Memby, if you want to record memberships, have automatic tracking, that kind of stuff, all the things you would expect from an AMS, it can give you the basics. But if you want the kind of reporting and metrics for engagement that I was talking about earlier, it may not be the association management system for you. Member 365 is quite a bit more expensive, but it's got a lot more features. It's a lot easier to use, and it does work well for both corporate memberships and individual memberships. Those are the two that I will encourage you to consider looking at. But what I really encourage you to do is the Canadian Society for Association Executives has a discussion forum, and that is a really great place to ask that question, because you get a lot of people coming back to you and saying, here's what we use and here's why, or here's why we hate this. And in fact, that's how we found out about Member 365, because somebody on that chat forum answered one of my questions. So I'm not saying, and we don't get paid for recommending AMSs, but those are two of the several that we've looked at over the last little while. One wins out on price. One is much better in terms of its functionality, but with an appropriately higher price.
Thanks, Erin. The next one, do you have any tips to recruit volunteers on national level?
Absolutely. It's the same kind of job, recruiting volunteers on a national level or a provincial level. First of all, you want to make sure that all of your members know about the volunteer opportunities. Are you regularly sending out messages that say, hey, this is what the committees are that we have, here's what they're doing, here's what's going on behind the scenes, and by the way, here's the committees on which we have vacancies, and here's the kind of commitment that you're going to be looking at. Make sure that all your members are aware, just from an outreach perspective. Now, in reality, e-blasts don't get you a high percentage of returns, but they do, on a drip basis, keep reminding people about the opportunities that are there. What you really want to use is circles of influence. And circles of influence, sometimes people's circles of influence is very regional. So if you want to reach out to people in BC, you're going to be looking for people in BC to use their circle of influence. But sometimes it's not by location, it's by specialty within an industry or an association. So it's the same thing. Use your existing volunteer circle of influence to say, hey, do you know people that might be good volunteers? Do you know people that have specific expertise in this area? Please, we're going to do an e-blast, but would you pick up the phone or send an email to somebody that you know or knows of you and encourage them personally and tell them why. Volunteers like to be told, humans like to be told why they would be of value. If you say, Erin, I think you should join a committee, it kind of sounds to me like you just need a warm body, and as long as I've got a pulse, that's what you're looking for. But if you say, Erin, your knowledge about this would make you really valuable on this committee, that makes me think, oh, wow, yeah, I really could make a contribution. So think about making it specific to the person you're reaching out to.
Excellent, thanks, Erin. The next question, I will advise the person that we have done a webinar about this in the past, and if you keep an eye out on the upcoming 2023 webinar list, you will see topics close to this. But maybe, Erin, you could give us the elevator pitch on how do you engage a board of directors that only shows up for the board meetings but nothing else, and even at the meetings there's very little engagement.
You're right. That is a webinar topic in itself. And by the way, if you go to our website under resources or go to YouTube, you can find recordings of our webinars. But what we're talking about here is people that are basically just filling a seat. And really, that is such a waste of resources when you've got a bunch of people who are using up seats that are valuable but aren't actually contributing. Part of this is training. And part of this is the influence of the chair. So let's talk about training. Before anybody ever comes onto the board of directors, you want to be upfront with them about what you're expecting. This is what we're expecting you to have done before every board meeting, that you have read all of the materials. By the time you come here, you are informed enough to have an informed discussion and to have a vote. Here's the kind of committee involvement we're expecting to have from you. We expect that every member of the board of directors is going to be sitting on at least one committee. So what I'm trying to say here is set the expectations right up front, number one. Number two, make sure every member of your board of directors has training. And by training, I mean training as soon as they join the board so they know exactly what's expected of them, and also ongoing training. Make sure that that's not just the only training directors receive. And 6 years later, the only training they've ever had was when they first came onto the board. Make sure you've got ongoing training. Make sure that at board of directors meetings, you're reaching out to people and saying, okay, we've got a challenge here. We don't have enough people on our committees. We need help from you. Make sure people understand what's expected of them. Now, if you've been very clear on what's expected and you're not getting what's expected, now's the time to do the outreach. And that outreach should not be being done by staff. That needs to be done by the senior leadership on the board of directors, which basically means the chair. So if you've got a chair and nobody else is contributing anything, you want the chair to pick up the phone, first of all, to the people that are the most likely to be able to come back on board and do something and say, hey, I noticed you haven't been saying much at board meetings. I noticed that, you often come to board meetings, you haven't had a chance to read the package. Are you just too busy to be on the board? Is there something I can do to help? You might have people that really don't want to be there. They really don't want to make the time, and this just gives them a good excuse to leave. And honestly, you're better off with an empty chair than someone who's there not doing anything. Because someone who's not doing anything, you might find that you've actually got a board of 6 directors where 3 of them could be hugely engaged, but it's the other 3 who do nothing that are dragging everybody else down. I've seen it happen where you've got a board of directors that was completely unengaged, didn't do anything in between board meetings, and you bring in a couple of new people, and all of a sudden the ones that weren't doing anything before are totally engaged by the newcomers who came in and just took the place by storm and started doing exactly what they needed to do. So new blood is critical as well too. If it's the same people year after year sitting around and looking at each other, that tends to be demotivating. So you do need new blood coming on the board on a regular basis.
Excellent, thanks, Erin. I have 2 more questions to ask, and I will keep that to just these 2 questions. If you have any further questions, I would strongly encourage you to send them in to the email address that's on your screen right now whilst Erin's asking these 2 questions. I just want to be mindful of everyone's time today. The second to last question is, we provide the easiest ways to promote the organization through email and social media, but nothing happens. What are we doing incorrectly? Any insight?
The way I'm interpreting that question is, AG, can you just read the first few words of it? I want to make sure I've got it right.
We provide the easiest ways to promote the organization through email and social media, but nothing happens.
Okay, what I think I hear you saying is that you're making it really easy for your volunteers to promote the association through email and through social media, presumably by giving them templates and links and stuff that they could use to promote the organization. And it sounds to me like you're saying it's not working. I'm not sure what the answer is. It's a very good thing that you're doing that. You want to make it easy, because if you say to Erin, use your social media to promote the organization. Well, if you gave me some, if you gave me some verbiage, some content that I can just copy and paste, I'm more likely to do it. If you give me a schedule, timeliness for me to be doing that, hey, something's coming up, could you guys all use this one sentence to promote this event that we've got coming up? If you're doing all of that, if you're giving people email templates, good on you, and don't stop doing that. That's really important. Why isn't it having an impact? I guess people aren't doing it. So why aren't people doing it? And maybe that's a question that you've got to ask your volunteers. Look, we're getting very little take up on this. Why do you think it is? Do we think we're making it easy, but it's actually not that easy? I know this isn't a magic pill to an answer, but I think the thing you need to do right now is pick up the phone to some of the people that actually are your volunteers and say, what are we doing wrong here? How could we make it easier for people? And maybe it's a real simple thing, or maybe it's a really deep thing. Maybe it's people don't really understand what the member value proposition is for the association. We kind of feel like it's a good thing to be part of it, but we really don't know why. So dig deep and dig shallow. Ask some people why they think it's not working, the people that you might be hoping would be using this. And then also dig a little deeper. Do we have a really clear member value proposition? And do people really understand what we're here for?
And the last one that I have here, Erin, is how do you suggest dealing with underperforming volunteers?
The answer to this one would be similar to the answer I gave earlier about board directors who don't do anything between board meetings and don't do anything at board meetings. That is an element of underperformance. Now, there's a difference between underperformance for a director and underperformance of a volunteer. Underperformance of a volunteer that's not a director, somebody that's just sitting on a committee, I mean, it's really very simple. You can just, honestly, you can just ask them to leave. If it gets to that point where you're just not getting anywhere, you can say, look, Joe, you know, I know that you volunteered to be on the committee, but you're just not showing up. So I'm going to encourage you to take a break right now. You know, we'll take you off the committee. If things change going forward, you know, please put your hand up and we'll talk about maybe putting you back on a committee at some point in the future. Nothing's stopping you from doing that. But you can't easily remove somebody from the board of directors. Typically, you've got to take that back to the members. Often you have to have a 2/3 vote. It's airing your dirty laundry. You don't want to be doing that. We've talked about that many times. So the negative impact of having an underperforming director is even more than having an underperforming volunteer. But the same principles apply. You want the chair of the committee or the chair of the board to reach out to that underperforming individual and say, hey, let's talk about what's going on here. You know, we really feel that you could be contributing a lot to the organization because you've got this, 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 and this, but it seems like, you know, you're just too busy. You've missed a lot of calls because you had other things come up. You know, what's going on in your life right now? Is this a good time? Is it not a good time? Do you feel we're not giving you the support that you need? Have the chair reach out to them and have a conversation with them. If you don't get anything back, then try a different tactic. And if they are not on the board of directors and you've tried it a couple of times, you're just not getting anywhere, then just make sure that when it comes time to refresh the committee, they're not invited back.
Excellent, Erin, thanks. And that's the end of the questions we have so far. But again, I would encourage people to send in any additional questions to the email that's on your screen.
Well, thanks very much. We've got an upcoming webinar in January. We're going to talk about what's in store for associations in 2023. So this is our chance to share with you our predictions for 2023. And following the webinar, AJ will be following up with you to get your feedback. We want to know about your input. We want to know what topics you'd like to hear about. If you've got any suggestions for our lineup of learning, please let AJ know when he picks up the phone to you. And if you've got something in mind right now, just send a message to me, the email that was on your screen earlier, erin.roberts@zeem.com. We'd love to get your suggestions. That concludes our webinar. Thank you for tuning in, and we will see you again in January.